We really should have waiting parents, not waiting children. Over 100,000 children are available for adoption through the U.S. foster care system, and 27% don't have anyone, like a relative or foster parent, in the process of adopting them. 60% are between the ages of 5 and 17, and 2/3 are part of sibling groups of 2 to 8 children. Hey listener, my name is Marcy Bursack. My husband and I chose adoption as our plan A. After blogging about our journey adopting a sibling pair, I began mentoring families right in my own living room. That passion grew into the Forgotten Adoption Option, a nonprofit I now lead as a volunteer while working full-time in the tech industry. From my blog, 3 books, app, and classroom lesson to now a 45-minute course called Foster Care Adoption Simplified, which you can find at ForgottenAdoptionOption.com, I've created practical, heartfelt resources to help families navigate the foster care adoption process. As you listen to this episode, I encourage you to ask yourself, who in my circle needs to hear this? It's often people in what we call helper professions, people like therapists, nurses, doctors, police officers, firefighters, social workers, and teachers like my husband. These are the people who tend to step forward to adopt children from foster care. But this work isn't only about becoming an adoptive family, it's also about becoming an advocate and ally. Every waiting child deserves not just a forever family, but a community of people who champion their future. Whatever led you to this podcast, I am thrilled that you are here. My mission is simple, to help every waiting child be with their forever family. And that's exactly why I host this podcast.
Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. In this episode, we will hear how a youth pastor adopted a teenager in her youth group. Beverly Jenkins and I met towards the end of the summer in 2024 when she offered to host a local gathering of Invested Faith Fellows at the North County Innovation Center, the organization she founded. Beverly was selected for this fellowship a few months before I was, and this was our first time meeting anyone from the group in person. Hey, Beverly.
Hi, Marcy. How are you?
So glad to. This is like such a cool thing. There are several other podcast episodes that folks may have listened to. If not, you can go back and prior where people have adopted teenagers. And I think this is such a special thing that we need more of. And I know it's out there. And so I love that you are here to share that. Beverly really wowed me with her hospitality and passion when she hosted us. She and her team didn't just say you can use our space, but they actually had like these delicious snacks. There was even like chicken salad. I remember it was so good. And they had drinks that were waiting for us as we gathered. And that was a really pleasant surprise. But to me, what was even more surprising was the order that we went around the table to do our introductions. After I shared about my heart for children waiting to be adopted in the foster care system, how I adopted my children, and the organization I started, the Forgotten Adoption Option, Beverly goes next and she says, well, I'm an adoptive mom. And she started to talk about how she did the unexpected thing. She adopted a teenager from her youth group. And so I'm so excited for her to bring that table conversation here and to share more color with it. So Beverly, let's start with kind of a snapshot of your life at that time. How long had you been married? How many children did you have? Like, how did you get involved in youth ministry? What was going on for you?
Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see. Where do I begin? So, got involved with youth ministry immediately after my husband and I joined this church in the inner city. And we were just elated over, just being a part of the church. And we got really active and really involved. And then, of course, when that happens and you're new in the church, the first thing they do is hand you work, hand you jobs. And so we didn't know that because we were new church people, new church goers, fresh to the scene. And that had to be probably, that was probably 30, 31, 32 years ago. And literally, we were like, oh, okay, this is fun, And so we ended up kind of, I guess, what you call like rising in the ranks of leadership at that church. And my husband became the youth pastor. And at this particular church did not really accept women in ministry at that time, just at that time.
Interesting.
And so I was the youth director. Of course, but I was really acting as, and I'm just going to throw it out there, I was really the youth pastor.
I knew what it was. We just knew what it was.
I knew what it was. Right. But anyway, so at any rate, my husband and I, we loved having these wonderful youth retreats. And so we just used to do these incredible youth retreats. And the ministry actually grew from about maybe 25, 30 kids to over 200 young people that we would serve in that particular community in the inner city. And
Huge
we
growth.
yeah, amazing, amazing. It's over probably like maybe a 3 or 4 year period though. So, but we loved it, and we didn't have any children at the time. We later on had Gabby. Gabby was our we didn't have any children together at the time. We're a blended family too. So all of our stuff is blended, adopted, and so we just got a whole eclectic family going here. And so we had Gabby later on, which is our second to the middle child. She's the only girl. And so we carry her around and take her to all the youth retreats, even though she was in a crib, like in a little, what do you call this? A strolling her around. But we just enjoyed it. This was really our life, and we enjoyed it. Loved working in youth ministry, had this incredible connection to the young people. And my husband had a real gift, or has a real gift, in expressing scripture where it's just really understandable. And so the young people just latched a hold of that and grew. And like I said, we met this young man on this journey who was in the, I guess, foster care system. It wasn't really, it was really strange because it wasn't really foster care when we first met him. He was at a group home that was here in St. Louis. And we used to visit that group home just to kind of share and play games with the kids. And it was an outreach, So we were like, okay, let's outreach to some of the community that's not necessarily going to come to our church. And so we used to go to that group home, and he was there. His name is Patrick. And so Patrick would be out there. And at that time, I think he might have been like maybe 11 years old. And he just was the cutest little guy. And I never forget because he was so active. Like he was just actively paying attention to everything, right? Asking questions, and but he just stood out. But then years later, he was moved to a different home, and just by divine providence, we ended up going to minister at that particular home too. It was another like a role model program. So I was like, we keep seeing this kid, he's just a sweetie pie, but we keep running into him. Eventually,
program, is that like because they're older, they're trying to help them kind of age out with
yeah, I think it's most, well, I think it was more about attention, like mentorship. So it was called African American role models. And so it was about role modeling, I believe, for them to be able to see father figures and to be able to get used to seeing, men who were doing good by their family. So they had something to kind of look at if they've been in the system that long, that's not been their model. So
a lot of absent fathers, a lot of single moms, that kind of thing. So you're at this, so he's at a second group home. He's 13 at this point.
He is, I think at this time, maybe at that time he might have been like 13 or 14. And so he's aging in this system, that is and you can tell that he's getting, as the more we keep running into him, he's becoming a little bit more cynical, and so we're just bumping into him every time. It's just, but it, like I said, it definitely was divine providence, because it wasn't like where you just wait, you go like, oh my gosh, I should really consider adopting this young man. Like that wasn't really how it went down for us. It was just like, hey, we're out here doing outreach, we're loving on these kids. And so we were loving on all of them at the same time, not really necessarily kind of picking him out of the crowd or anything like that. Even though he was very uniquely positioned, because every time we were there, he was making himself very known, that, hey, I'm here, I'm in the midst of everyone, and just a sweet, just, but not even to stand out. It just was his personality. He just was a charismatic young person, just a really charismatic kid. So fast forward maybe about a year later, from there, he's about maybe 15 years old. And we take those kids that are African American role models on one of our retreats. And so we were like, okay, let's have our own youth retreat this year. And we invited those children. And like I would do every night for every youth retreat, I would just pop into every room and say, hey, good night, and, you guys sleep well. And then I would close the door, and so I happened to pop into that room where Patrick was sleeping, and he pops up off the bed and he goes, Miss Jenkins. And I was like, yeah. I said, what's up, Patrick? He goes, will you adopt me? And I went, okay, have a good night, sleep well, and I close the door, you know. It's like,
It's like, how
oh my God,
serious is that, right? Like, is he being playful? Does
right.
he mean it? Is
Yeah. What's he doing? Yeah. And so, yeah. And so literally I went home and I could not rest like for a whole week. Like I was just, and I talked to Ken about it, my husband, and I said, hey, Patrick popped up and he just said, hey, will I adopt him? And he was like, oh, okay, well, like, and this is how I know it's God. When my husband doesn't give me no, there's no back talk. There's no like, like, what are you crazy or what's wrong with you? He was like, well, let's pray about it and see, what the Lord says. And I was like, okay. But he also saw that I was restless over it and I was wrestling with this connection with this kid. And I was like, why do I feel like so connected to this young man? And so anyway, it didn't leave me, and I finally talked to my husband. We sat down, and I said, "Hey, I think we should consider adoption. Like, we should really consider that." And he was like, "Okay." And he understood that, we both did. We understood that adopting older children, it comes with a lot, and so we wanted to prepare ourselves and our house, and also our daughter, who was now, I think she might have been like 9 or 10 at the time. And so, not knowing Patrick's background, not knowing what he'd been through, not knowing all the variables that can go wrong with adopting older children, or adopting children, period. And so, but we wanted to lean towards our love for the Lord and our thoughts about how he would guide us, in this process. And so we started the process when Patrick was 15, and
you had
yeah.
known him for like 4 years. So there's a couple things you said in there that I think our listeners would probably like be like,
Hmm.
okay,
Sure.
Beverly, like, what does that mean? You said that there's like a lot to consider when you're adopting older children. What for you were you thinking through? What did you have to consider?
Well, one is that we have a little girl at home now. And I know this may sound very contrary for some people who are listening, but the thoughts are is that if he had been in a home where he was abused, would he abuse? Like, would he have learned those kind of things, and are carrying those, as his own trauma? Not that he would be a bad kid or there was something wrong with him, but that trauma carries a lot of weight. And so how would he respond, in anger? How will he respond in conflict? How will he respond when there is, any kind of necessary discipline? And so all those things were factors that, and then we were like, how will he respond to Gabby, our daughter? How will he regard her, as a little girl? And so, we had to consider all that and think through, like, okay, what will we do in the household? Like, how do we safeguard the house to make sure that he's safe, that we're all safe, that everyone is okay, and we're all listening to one another, the communication is there. So all of those things had to be factored in. And of course, you can't factor it all. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no factoring all the things that can happen. There's no factoring all the things that go right even. So yeah. So, so that
Sure.
but a lot more went right than ever went wrong. So I will make
Mm,
sure that I say that. There was so much
mhm,
more that
mhm.
went right.
You wanted to be thoughtful and diligent, right? You didn't want to just kind of
Yes.
act on a feeling. You really wanted to kind
No.
of calculate and think through and be intentional and be sensitive to his needs and then the environment he was going to be moving into. And I think that's really important to call out because it can sound like kind of this rosy idea, but like there really is planning to this. And there really is more to it than just like, this sounds great, right? But then on the other side, you had said you kind of wanted to prevent things from going wrong that can go
Yeah.
wrong, whether it's an older child or just in general. What were those things that you were trying to kind of prepare
Mhm.
for?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. So this is one of the things that was really. So Patrick had been in the foster care or group home system since he was like 9 years old. And so here he is, 15, going through this process of adoption. And we're like, yes, Patrick, we want you to come and live with us. And it took probably about a year to get him through, all of that system. His natural father had to be found for him to basically um not, to absolve his rights, to Patrick, and turn those rights over to us as family. And And he was willing to do that. It just took some maneuvering to find dad to get that done. But anyway, funny story. So Patrick, the first night that he's here, I said, "Oh gosh, so excited for you to be here," And let me back up a little bit, because the sad part about the foster care system back then is that Patrick was coming to us. We had no idea that they were going to put all of his things in this horribly looking black trash bag, and that just broke my heart. I was like, I would have brought a suitcase with me. I would have gladly, packed his things up, before he heads out. But and it's just
durable and it's functional, but it sure doesn't convey hospitality, right? Like it's the opposite of who you are.
it felt horrible, and it felt like such a space of a lack of dignity for Patrick. He paid no attention to it, so we brought no attention to it either. We just, we both, my husband and I both were like, oh, you know, and I said, "Where's your things at, Patrick?" And so he puts them in the trunk, and he's like, "There's my stuff." He just was happy, he just throws the, he doesn't care, he's like trash bag, trash can. He doesn't care. He's like, "Throw it in the back. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get out of here. Let's go." So
ready for the past 6 years to do this day. Like, he's not thinking about that at all. Yeah.
Oh, he didn't care, Yeah. So, and I know that there are organizations now that make sure that there's different means for that, which is wonderful. I applaud them for thinking of those kind of things. But anyway, first night Patrick gets here.
Rob Shear is also a podcast guest, runs an organization in Maryland called Comfort Cases, and that's exactly what they do. So go catch the episode. Just want to make sure everyone knows about that too.
I didn't know that. I never heard of that, but I just knew that there were people out there who were making sure that these kids don't have to put all their stuff as they're moving into, garbage bags. And so it's wonderful. That's wonderful. But anyway, he comes in, excuse me, first night, and I bake brownies. I make a big pan of brownies. And so, so we had dinner, and the brownies are on the stove. And I come in the stove, and Patrick's standing in front of the stove like a Cheshire cat. And so I said, "Patrick," so I look in the brownie pan, there's no brownies in there, right? Absolutely none. And so he goes, I said, "Patrick, where's the brownies at? Where did the brownies go?" And he goes, "I ate them." So wait. He said, "I ate them." And I was like, "You did not eat all these brownies. This pan is huge. This pan is I said, "You didn't eat all these brownies." And he stood there for a minute, and he thought, "Gosh, I better tell the truth, because this is, and you can see the fear in his face." And so I said, "Well, but not fear from me, it's just his own fear from the trauma of," and when you hear this, you'll understand it. So he had stuffed all the brownies in his pocket. And a lot of that, yeah, it's funny to us now. We talk about it now, we laugh about it now, because he's 42, so we're like, "You remember you stuffed all those brownies in your pocket?" So he's cracking up. But back then it was understand, we knew that. That's what I mean about what you prepare for. Some things you can, and some things you can't. And he had never for his life been in a family dynamic where there was sharing or you know what I mean. So he was scared that he wasn't going to get to eat brownies again, that if they don't like me, or if they don't keep me, then I should put some stuff in, store some stuff, because I may not get to stay here. I may not get to be a part of this ongoing. So I have to protect myself and so he had been living in protection mode for so many years that it's very difficult to walk into a family environment and try to do something new or do something different, so.
They smell amazing. Like, I'm just thinking, like, in that scene, it's like there's warm chocolate. Like, so what did everywhere do? Like, did you put it in plates? Like, how do you end the scene? Does it get to
no? I promise you, we ended the scene with, "Patrick, those are your brownies. You can pull them out of your pockets now, because I'm sure they're full of lint, and they're yours. They're all yours. And we will bake a new batch of brownies."
There too. Like, is this in the fall by chance? He's cold, or?
No. Patrick is hilarious. And so at that time, I'm pretty sure, and it's so crazy because I can't remember what I ate yesterday, but I remember that moment. He had on a pair of black jeans, and all the brownies were stuffed in his pocket. And I was like, "This is amazing, Patrick." Like, yeah.
Wow.
Sweet kid, though. Sweet, sweet, sweet. And so it's those kind of things that you can't.
Yeah.
Those are emotional. They're funny, but they're emotional moments where you're learning what he has been through. And so,
And you're
now
choosing your
we're
response, right? Because like
exactly.
that could be such a moment of shame, right?
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
you could react, so like, what are you doing? Like, why? But
Yeah.
yet it's really like, what led him to
No,
this?
yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
loving and
What's happened?
processing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And he was very good about, I said, hey, what made you put the brownies in your pocket like that? And that's where, I'm giving you all the explanation now, but that explanation came from him. And the thing about it is that Patrick is extremely smart. And at that time, he's a 16-year-old. You would think that he couldn't come up with these elaborate words because he's been in this system for so long, but he was always a brilliant kid, always. And so these jewels are like inside of these foster care homes, but they're brilliant. They're brilliant, brilliant kids. And so he articulated very well how he was feeling and why he put the brownies in his pocket. And and he was like, this is not my norm. And he wanted to make sure, because I think that over the course of time he had gotten to know us and he knew he could trust us a little bit. You know what I mean? Like he had enough trust to tell the truth in that moment. He had just enough, like trust in us, you know. Whereas he in his own life had not really felt any trust for anyone. So the fact that we had gotten to that point on the first night was like, okay, this is going to be fine. It's going to be okay. So
So beautiful. So did you end up making more brownies later for
I
everyone? Like,
did. I did. I just
and
said,
every
hey, we're gonna.
time the story comes up now?
Yeah, every time. If I make a pan of brownies and he's present, and because now he lives across the world in New York, so I get to see him about twice a year. But if we do anything with brownies, of course Patrick's gonna be like, oh God, here they're gonna go. We're gonna talk about my brownie incident, But yeah, but it's a ball of laughs. And what's really interesting is that Patrick, I have four children. We have four children. Like I said, we're a blended family, and then we had two children together. Um, but out of all of our children, Patrick has got to be probably one of the most compassionate and the most he remembers everything. He remembers everybody's birthday, he remembers everybody's events, and he's got a Rolodex of, that's my brother so and so, he's doing this and he's doing, and so he's very connected, and you would think that that connection would come more so from the kids that you birth, but they're connected too, but he's very connected. I'll just put it that way. He's very connected to his family and to what's going on. So
That's amazing. It sounds like he
it
very much
is.
feels like he belongs and he's
Oh
part of the
yeah.
family. That's so amazing.
Oh
So
yeah.
back when that kind of period of time when it was like weighing heavily on you and your husband was like,
Mhm.
well, let's pray about it and let's just, see if
Yeah.
this uncovers. What were the conversations like that you all were having? Because I'm imagining
Yeah.
it wasn't in silence, right? Like were you kind of processing
Oh
together?
no. Yeah, that's a good question, Marcy. We were definitely processing together and praying. Like we were really like, God, is this really what you would have us to do, as a family? We don't want to and I think that adopting any child is never a mistake. Like there's no thinking that are we making a mistake? It wasn't a thought like that. It's a thought of, do we have the grace to make sure that we are the family that's equipped enough to deal with whatever Patrick came with. And so that was really the conversation we were having, is that what does it look like if, and we were running our own scenarios. What does it look like if Patrick was sexually abused? How do we handle that? What if Patrick was verbally and physically abused? How will we handle that? What if he needs psychological care? What if he needs medicine? What if he needs, like all those things were weighed, and we talked about those things, and all the answers came back that the Lord is gracious and He will supply, and that's how we managed it. Patrick was definitely physically abused as a child. And we found that out from just looking at a photo album. He had a photo album of his family, and he looked at one picture and he says, oh, I have a picture of me. He said, I've never seen a picture of myself without a black eye. And he just said it so matter of factly. And so, like, it just was, he was happy, and I went in the back room and bawled my eyes out. I just was like, he's never seen a picture of himself without a black eye. And I thought, this is devastating, and this is all through the course of that first maybe 6 months of, that get to know you period where we're unpacking his things, as he's going through this process, because we unpacked him slow. Like we were like, let's unpack him slow, only because of him, not because of us. We unpacked slow because we were like, we want you to be comfortable. And finally he was comfortable enough to pull his photo album out, and so letting him unpack his things that were personal things anyway. His belongings had already been unpacked, but his personal things of, here's my photo album, here's my scrapbook, here's my, those things he unpacked slowly with us. And so in that moment, I just was like, I don't even understand what happens in a family dynamic when someone can harm, a child like that, and then take a picture, or, or they're in the pictures and no one is saying, hey, every picture that we see of you, Patrick, you have a black eye, or you have a bruise, what's happening, and so those kind of things, I'm sure that those kind of things happened later. That's the reason why he was taken from the home, him and his brothers, his siblings. But yeah, it really unnerved me for just for a moment.
It's hard to, speaking from my own adoptive parent journey, it's hard when our kids share things
Yeah,
that for them were just what happened, and to
yeah,
us they're so outside of what should happen.
yeah,
It's hard to sit with those things. So yeah, I respect that you were like, and I'm going to another room, because
yeah.
there's
Yeah, it
space for
still
that.
kind of messes me up, Marcy. I like, even to this day, like I remember the moment just comes back, like it floods me. Like I know the place we were sitting. I know the couch we were sitting on, Excuse me, we don't any longer own that couch, but I can picture that couch, that moment, and his glee, his happiness over, this one picture. And of course I have that picture, that's a picture that of course he wanted me to have. He's like, this is, and so, but when I look at that, I'm reminded, that this is the picture that Patrick had as a child, as a young person. That's the picture he looked at and said, oh, this is the only picture that I don't feel damaged in, or that I don't have a bruise, or that, so yeah, so it devastates me, every time, every time.
Yeah, it sounds like a core memory for you, like the
It
moment,
is.
all the
Ooh,
details
yeah,
are there.
right.
Yeah. So in the process, so it sounds like, I know there's some terms out there like fictive kin, where like you're not related to a
Hmm.
child that's available for adoption, but like you're in their life in some way. And then if that's kind of your story, or even if like you're a relative, like blood relative, you tend to kind of go in a fast track towards adoption. You said
Hmm.
it took about a year, but did you have to go through classes and a whole hoopla of a process?
It's really interesting because when I say it took a year, Patrick was really already with us. Like he was, you know, when they're that age, normally, I mean, the lady asked us a couple questions. She was a social worker, and she was like, and she was very suspicious too. I must throw that out there. She was like, "Why do you want to do this?" You know, I mean, he's this age. Like, what are you all? What is like basically like interrogating us? And so we were like, we're here because you all said that this was a way for them to be out of this
Strange.
system, right?
Yeah, I've had that
Yeah.
happen with families I coach, and it is the most bizarre thing, because I'm like, just because there was one person that like was ill intended, like it's not
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and so we just endured it, we listened,
Mm.
and we went through the process, whatever paperwork they had for us, and it was very minimal. Like it wasn't like there was a lot of things that they asked us to do. They came to our home to inspect where he would stay, where he would be, and that was because I think at that time he was 15. In our state, in the state of Missouri, I think you can be independently just on your own from your parents at 16 anyway. But I think that starting that process at 15 created like that need to do all the social welfare checks. And we understood that. So we didn't mind that. I think that the court system day was the hardest. We went to court with Patrick, and his father was there, and his natural father. And his natural father never looked at him, didn't speak to him, passed right by him. And I looked at Patrick, and I guess he was so used to it. He didn't react. I'm sure he had his own feelings and his own reactions over that moment, but he didn't allow space for any kind of emotion at that point. And his dad, I think, suffers from mental illness anyway. He had changed his name to legally to Shaka Zulu at that time. So our court hearing went really fast because normally it's supposed to be a couple of court hearings. But when the judge asked for him to come up, he said, "This is the name. This is your real name." And he says, "Yeah, this is what I changed my name to." And he says, he just hit his gavel and he says, "It's done. Like go ahead and sign off here and relinquish your rights. Thank you for coming today." And then process was over for us, and Patrick was, free to roam about the country with us. And so,
Interesting. So they really just transferred rights in that moment. So he didn't even have,
yeah,
he wasn't legally free until that moment in which he was
yeah,
kind of just, okay, interesting sequence there.
yeah,
Wow.
it was quite interesting. Yeah, he had to relinquish his rights as a parent, to for us to become his legal parents, and so that was our process. But yeah, it just, and we Patrick, he kept his last name, with his family, which was his choice. And so his last name actually is really interesting, is my maiden name. So his name is Patrick Lee, and my maiden name is Lee. Yeah.
That's
It's
like
a
so
yeah.
fitting. How interesting. So
What's
I'm wondering,
Oh, no, good.
go ahead. What are you thinking about next?
No, no, please, please, please. I was gonna say what also is interesting is that Patrick looked almost identical. He would look like as if like I birthed him. Like when he came, everybody was like, "This is uncanny." Like, I mean, same jawline, same structure. If you look right above my head, that's Patrick right here in this picture.
So
And
Beverly's
so,
sitting in her living room and there's like a 4x4 beautiful squares on her wall. And he's got, it's like a gray hat. Yeah. He's got
yes.
like facial hair for those that are
Hmm.
listening along. That, yeah, he does.
Yeah.
I see the shape of your face is
He
more
favors,
rounded. Yes.
yeah. We
Yes.
favor so much, and it's almost uncanny. And so he looks more like me than all of my kids, so that I birthed. So so we know that, and he's always felt that way too. Like we've all had a strong connection. Patrick
Mhm.
has very much so been without a shadow of a doubt, like integrated into the fabric of the family even at 15, very easily. Like, I mean, I'm talking about extended family as well. So my
Wow.
mother, our family, everyone accepted Patrick as our son, not as an adopted son. We stopped using the term adopted. We didn't use it at all. People would be like, "Well, you look too young to have, like, how did this happen? Like, what do you mean he's 42 and you're," and I was like, "You know what? Just you'll get it one day and
Yep.
it's
That's so
okay."
good. That's so
Yeah.
good.
Hmm.
That is so good. So I'm curious because, for some of us, oh, okay, you adopted a teen. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And how nice of you, right? But then on the other part is really the contrast for Patrick. And that
Yeah.
is Patrick was in an unlikely scenario of getting adopted, just from what the data shows us, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if you can help our listeners. I'm sure this went through your mind at some level too, that it's like if we don't do this and help in this way, and we're feeling so called to do this, if we don't do this, what would it have looked like for Patrick to age out of the system and become a young man that way? Like what is the contrast, just to kind of help our listeners see, okay, this is the
Yeah.
path he took, but what would he have taken otherwise?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was not without difficulty for him pathway wise. I knew that Patrick would have some deficits, and we talked about those things. We talked about those things with Patrick. We knew that there were, just because of the trauma, there's some time lapses. There's some things that should have been instilled that were not, just weren't there. I mean, it just was not, and he had to grab a hold of those things. Empathy and compassion and those kind of things came, I won't say learned, but they had to be imparted. He had to see it, in order for him to really grasp, like, okay, this is what empathy looks like. This is what, but another pathway that he could have taken. We're in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm not, there's nothing wrong with my city. I love St. Louis. St. Louis is an incredible city, but for a young man who's been in the system and then to get out of that system or age out of that system and not have any support system, then there's only two places that he probably would be, and that would be in jail or dead. And those were the tracks, that we know statistically that Patrick would have fallen right into those cracks, easily, easily.
And I think that's so important to point out because I find that people think about when children are in foster care, they think about, oh, they're children. And sometimes we think about them being 18 or somewhere
Hmm.
younger, usually
Right.
younger, but we often forget what happens when the system is gone for them and that
Yep.
support is gone for them. And so I thank you for pointing that really unfortunate reality out. But that's really what this
Hmm.
is about is, when we can help kids while they're in the
Yeah.
system, especially, we can prevent so much that doesn't need to happen
So
in their
much.
lives. It really doesn't
Yeah.
need to
Mm.
happen. And so, Beverly, I wonder, I know some of
Mhm.
our listeners volunteer with their church or parish youth. I know several people, it's a common thread among
Yeah.
families that do this. It's really interesting. I'm curious, what advice would you give them if they ever had a student ask the same question, a student in the youth group asked the same thing Patrick did? Will you adopt me?
Yeah. Do it. Like it changed our life. Like do it. Like do it. Like I double dog dare you to do it because it when I say it changed my husband and my our life, we learned from Patrick how to live unselfish. We learned from Patrick how to deal with hard moments. Like we learned from him like how I mean, listen, Patrick went with us to Disney World, and my our daughter just got married last October, and Patrick had never gone to Disney, had never interested in it at all. But this time he was going to go because, of course, his sister's getting married, so he's like, I gotta go to Disney World. But the awe and wonder on his face at 40, now he was 41 then, at 41 years old is, I mean, to learn how to appreciate and to grab a hold of like adoration for things that we normally take for granted, like that's his world. And so I was watching him just walk through, look at Mickey Mouse, and he's like, "Ma, do you see that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've seen it 100 times, but but for you, it's like it's everything was always the first time for him." And
Mm.
so he taught us that, like appreciation. I know that I learned that from Patrick. Yeah, absolutely.
And you didn't even pause. Like I finished the question and you already had your answer. So
It's just, yeah, it's it's so there. Like it's just so many things that we could go on and on. But yeah, no, I don't have to pause on that. I think that it changed our life, and I know it would change other people's lives. They would really see themselves in the reflection of that child's face, that teenager that you think is almost an adult. They don't even know what adulthood even looks like, even though they're almost there. You know what I mean? Like the age of adulthood. But it's just we just they're just little children in bigger bodies. That's all they are.
And you do it all over again, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would. I told my husband. I said, I said, what if we just I was thinking about a little baby. I was like, we could adopt a little baby. Now we're empty nesters, And he was like, I want to sleep, Beverly. He
Plenty
was
more
like,
teenagers, Beverly. There's more. We have a
that's
need, a
right.
significant need of
There's
teenagers.
more teenagers. That's
There
right.
are
Absolutely.
teenagers and
Yeah.
siblings. Yeah, we
Yes.
both are helping in some way there. Okay, so in closing, this
Yeah.
is an interesting question. So I kind of like this is going to go interesting. So if you spoke directly to youth in foster care, because I've had plenty of folks that have aged out that listen that say,
Yeah.
"Man, I wish someone would have done this for me." So let's say there's someone
Yeah.
listening that's in the system right now. Maybe they're in a group home, maybe they're in a foster home, maybe they're living with whoever. Okay, would you encourage them to do what Patrick did and to go ask someone?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would. And encourage them also to understand that even if they don't do it, if they say no or they that you're still worth it. Like you are still worth it. And I mean I love the scripture that says that when my mother and father forsake me, that the Lord will take me up. That you have an advocate with the Father all the time, and it's hard to. I can't grasp it. I've never been in those shoes, so I don't know what it's like to be on the other side of foster care. I only know the side of the great joy that we received from receiving a person, a child, a young man from that side. So I think they have to see themselves as a gift. You've got to look at yourself and go, I am a gift. Like if you adopt me, you're gonna freaking change your life. Like, like I'm a life changer. And so I think that that's how they have to look at it, is that I'm a game changer. Bring me in, put me in the game. And I promise you, I'm going to change it.
So beautiful. So much wisdom. Thank you. Thank you, Beverly. This has been such a treat.
Yeah. Thank you, Marcy. Thank you. Brought up a lot of good memories for me too.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. It truly matters that you listen today, because by tuning in, you're opening your heart to the stories of children in foster care, sparking empathy and starting to see how your unique role, whether as a friend, advocate, or even as a future adoptive parent, can bring hope and belonging to a child or sibling group that is waiting. I also want to personally invite you to reach out to me to ask anything that's on your heart. I promise no judgment. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and I mean it when I say you can ask anything. I know it can feel awkward to ask questions publicly, and that's why I carve out time during my lunch hour and evenings while my kids and husband are at martial arts to mentor others one-on-one. Your questions matter, your curiosity matters, and most importantly, the role you are playing in helping children in foster care matters. Together, we can bring hope and belonging. Until next time, take care and keep the conversation going.